Okay, we're going to get started. If you're just getting here, if you want continuing education credit, you got to scan your badge at the table in the back at the end of the session. This is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Session, building blocks for protecting our defense industrial base. My name is Dan Turacini. I've been involved with the ecosystem for a number of years now. What we have on our panel include CCAs. Everybody who's a CCA has been involved in assessment since the beginning of January. And we have an RPO doing pre-assessments, mock assessments, and preparation. We have two licensed or approved training providers. I am also a provisional instructor, as is Ollie over there, and we teach these classes, and we'll talk more about that. And then we have at least three C3POs, because you're done, right? Three C3POs represented. So we got a good variation of what the ecosystem is all about and how they can help you. We're not here to market, we're here to educate. We're very interested in giving you what we've learned over the last few months on where CMMC is, but more importantly, where the ecosystem and the OSCs are who are being assessed. If you were in Katie Arrington's speech, you really don't need to see this too much, but I'm going to go through this real quickly. The big thing is we are the target. We are over twice the global average of attacks and content subtracted or absconded from the United States. We're still doing the same old thing we've been doing for years. We're still using username and password. Multi-factor authentication has been relegated to two-factor authentication, which I don't think is great. But the idea is that we want to keep our warfighters safe. We heard about the non-kinetic warfare that's going on. It's going on strong, and that leads to kinetic warfare and other problems. And it all, as she mentioned, she talked about the fighter that we built that was copied, and within 6 months after we put out a multi-year program, an R&D program, and it diminishes our global competitive advantage overall. Real quick on what if. A lot of things are going on, whether they're ships colliding, wings falling off of tail wings falling off of aircraft. And then I put this third one. There's no evidence yet or complete evidence about a cyber attack, but a lot of our waterways are under attack, whether it's the Suez, the Panama Canal. If you look at it from a dual purpose, if you know there's a big LNG terminal up the channel from our Navy base in the Tidewater area. So we have these big LNG tankers coming upriver, and if GPS was spoofed, it only takes 30 seconds of spoofing to put them off course. It could be a big catastrophe of one of our major bases. So I'd like to talk to you a little about where the ecosystem is. As you know, the rule was completed for the program, 32 CFR, in January. And these are all the documents. If you take this link, you should go to this link to understand what you need to do. We're going to focus mostly on level 2, which is highlighted here. And the two important documents are the scoping guide and the assessment guide. I think what we're going to see and what we're going to be finding is that in the scoping area, people don't really know where their CUI is. They don't understand where it's coming from all the time, how it's arriving, where they're storing it, and how it leaves, when you're sending information to the customer. So the scoping guide is very important. It's a very short document. You should know it back and forth, but use it as a guide to set up your diagrams, to set up your beginning of your system requirements. And then there's the assessment guide. This is a very long document. This covers all 120 practices, 320 objectives. I just pulled out the AC control here because I think it's very important that you look beyond just the practice statement and the objectives, because the rest of these things here, potential assessment methods, how we're going to interview, how we're going to review documentation, how we might be testing your organization, is all laid out there. This is the guide we use to come in and talk to you and talk to your people. Then there's this discussions and further discussions. That includes the examples of what we might be looking for. So it's a real good blueprint to prepare. Don't go out on this and reinvent the wheel. Don't go without all this knowledge. I even go as far as recommending that you either hire or put some of your folks in the IT world, in the HR world, through the CCP class. You don't have to take the exam. You don't have to go through and become an assessor. But you get the basic knowledge from a certified assessor, like myself, who's a provisional instructor, who's telling you what we're looking for, because that's what we're teaching the assessors. This is what we're looking for. And if you don't know what we're looking for at great detail, then you're going to miss the boat. You're going to be providing information maybe you don't need, and forgetting the information you do need. So I'm going to introduce the panel. On the far end, we got Ali Prabhai. He's the chief executive of EC First. They are a C3PAO. They're an APP and an
ATP. Please get the acronyms right.
You've got to change the acronyms on us. That's the government for you. We got Cole French right next to him. He's with Kratos. They are also a C3PAO. Then we got Turbi Mosa. His company is M&S Group. They are also a C3PAO. And then finally, we got Greg Manson. They are an RPO. They do a lot of work with preparing organizations. So they got a good insight, as do the C3POs, and what are the organizations missing? What are they forgetting? What are they not paying attention to? So we're going to start with Ali, as soon as I get his slides up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Really excited to be here with all of you. What could be more exciting than talking about CMMC, right? Nothing. Right? So, when we think about CMMC, it's all about addressing risk, global risk in the supply chain. The supply chain is, in fact, global. And it all comes down to one word. We are surrounded by risk, and CMMC is about delivering resilient. It's about establishing a resilient global supply chain. Now, as Daniel mentioned, we are a C3PO, as are my colleagues here, and everything you see on the slide, and I'm sure you can't read, the font size is too small, so you can't read everything, but when we perform our assessments of organizations that are looking to get CMMC Level 2 certified, every one of these bullets is a finding before we could move on to the final assessment in the preliminary review of the documentation. So the defense industrial base organizations that are seeking certification have to be really meticulous, disciplined. What Daniel talked about, those two documents are pivotal, the scoping document and the Level 2 assessment guide, 276 pages, I think. And by the way, there's no more exciting body of work than those two documents, so cancel your plans for tonight and think about reading those documents. But those two documents have a wealth of information that really should be read through by individuals that are in the defense industrial base to prepare for their certification. And we only have about 2 or 3 minutes or 4 minutes in each of our presentations, so I'll get to this slide very quickly. To me, the most critical body of work, as you're looking for CMMC readiness, getting ready to go through an assessment, comes down to the SSP document, the System Security Plan. That's the concrete and steel. That's like an octopus with tentacles, right? It's a pointer to all your artifacts. So it's really, really important that organizations do a great job with their System Security Plan. And if you'll notice, I deliberately mistyped at the title, Secret Sauce. The AO stands for Assessment Objective. So it's really important if you read the CMMC Level 2 Assessment Guide and look at each of those, the magic number, which Toby doesn't get excited, but Toby gets very excited when you mention the number 320, okay, because there are 320 assessment objectives, and he's going to talk to you about that. But you want to make sure your SSP document brings together these 320 assessment objectives and the associated artifacts, and there could be 1,000 plus artifacts. So with that, I'll bring my presentation to a close. And by the way, on your right, you'll see there's a T-shirt. You can just email me and let me know your size, address. We'll get you this T-shirt. But what I'm very excited, I don't know if you can read it. In God we trust, the rest we audit. What could be more exciting? Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Ollie. And I want to point out, all of these fellas compete with each other, right? But they work together here because we want to get education out to you guys. It's a very small ecosystem still, and there's a lot of OSCs seeking compliance that need this education. And I hope this, at a minimum, encourages you not only to open up those documents, but to get some further education on the ecosystem and how CMMC works.
We compete with each other, but we are the best of friends.
Yes, we are.
That's right.
Okay, hold on a minute.
Where are Cole's slides?
It disappeared.
I lost a slide.
Just wait faster.
There you go. Yeah.
Tell a joke. We can get started. If you want to start.
Yeah, sure. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for checking out our conversation about CMMC. As Dan mentioned, I'm from Kratos Technology and Training Solutions. We are a C3PAO and RPO, and we're also actually a member of the DIB as well. So kind of a different perspective. We bring sort of both sides of it, I guess. We've helped our own organization go through all of this, and then we're also practitioners in this space working with other organizations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what we've learned so far with CMMC and what we think is ahead. And when I talk about what we've learned so far, some of that will obviously take into account working with our own organization, but also working with our clients as well. So I think we've already kind of hit on the fact that there's still a lot of education that's needed out there about CMMC. And like Dan mentioned, the training courses, things like that, you don't necessarily have to look at those as, I'm going to become an assessor. You can look at those as, my organization's going to need to go through CMMC. I want to train up my IT staff so they know how to talk to. Because when you go through an audit, it's just as important to be prepared, but also part of that preparation is, how am I going to answer these questions? And I think that's something people overlook a lot of the time. From an operational standpoint, what we've assessed so far, organizations we've worked with, enclaves, so paring down your scope as much as possible. We're seeing a lot of success with that approach, which I think the reasons for that are kind of obvious. There's still a lot of rough edges in the program, and that's kind of more internal to what we see, but there's still a lot of things being worked out. As I have on the bottom here, assessor interpretation. I think there's still a lot of inconsistencies. You talk to one C3PAO versus another, kind of get different opinions on things. And from what we're seeing in assessments, there's kind of three things we're seeing organizations struggle with. Risk assessments. So there's a control around performing risk assessments. Risk assessment is broad and looks at more than just what are my cybersecurity vulnerabilities, right? It looks at what are things that could happen to my mission, organization, all of that. So that's something we've seen organizations struggle with. POAMs as well. A POAM is not the outcome of an assessment. A POAM is something you should have in place all the time and be actively maintaining. And then frequencies. Make sure that what you're defining to your assessor is something they can evaluate affirmatively. And then as far as what's ahead, so I won't go into too much on this, but the Title 48 aspect of CMMC sometime later this year, which is what will kick off phase 1 of the implementation. And then, I think really working out the rough edges of the program is really what we're going to be seeing over the next year, at least internally.
Thank you, Cole.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we have Toby Musa, who is with M&S Group, and I'll bring those slides up now. Whoops. Changed my window.
All right, good afternoon, and thank you for everybody sitting up here with me. It's great to sit here. Ali mentioned 320. There's 320 things you have to do, and I jokingly say spend 5 minutes and 20 seconds a day, 320 seconds, reading the CMMC Level 2 Assessment Guide, and in about a month you will have gotten through it, and even if you're not an expert, you'll know enough to have a sense of what your organization needs to do. M&S Group has been in this from the beginning. Our family of companies really models everything we do on risk framework, right? Operational risk, financial risk, technological risk, human risk, vendor risk, and so on. And the next slide here, just a little more background. We are also a government contractor, and our sister company carry a facility clearance, so we eat the soup we sell. We have to do these things, and we understand the impacts there. We do provide MSP services, and so that gives us a sense of what the day-to-day tickets and support and life that a company goes through trying to live under this compliance, right? And so we take that into account as we think of our assessors, and we try to be gentle assessors, right? We're all trying to understand how you meet the requirement. We're not looking for you to fail. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. Right, with everything that we've observed in the market, I thought it would be really good to make sure that you see what we have as the end in mind. Our final task after an assessment is to take this spreadsheet you see on the screen and submit it to the government's EMAS system. So these are the fields that the assessor has to fill out. Right, so I know the font's probably too small, but briefly, we have to list the artifacts, the people we interviewed, what we examined, whether it was tested, the overall comments. They ask us how many minutes we spent discussing that with you, whether things are inherited and what dependencies there are, and the score, the date, and the name of the assessor. Right. So this is the actual document we upload to the government. And so in service of that, to make your life easier, what we suggest is even if you have an amazing SSP that really maps to every single thing, you jump to the next slide, please. So we suggest you, no matter what you have developed already, have your own internal spreadsheet by objective. And you want to list the file name, list the directory where the file is, and if it's in SharePoint or if it's in the GRC, say where that is. The title, actually list out the page and the paragraph that answers the objective. Your assessor wants to save you money by going through the assessment in a timely fashion. Dan, could you go to the next slide? Yeah, so this is the one here. So you want down to the page, paragraph here in the middle, and actually discuss what it is that you're providing to the assessor. If you fill this mapping, this spreadsheet out by objective ahead of time, your assessor is going to be able to quickly go through phase 1, and your phase 2, where you're coming on site and doing physical controls and perhaps the other interviews, we've seen people finish on a Tuesday or Wednesday when they're very well organized. That means you save money because your team is not spending time talking to us as assessors. You get through the whole process. Additionally, each objective that's not listed or that you can't fill this out for might lead your team to go, hey, we need to go back and look again, make sure it's met. So just some observations from the assessments that we've been involved in.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, too, that if you do this mapping, you're making it easy for the assessors that are coming in, right? You get them out of your hair as quickly as possible. But it's more important for you because then you see all this mapping, you share this with your employees, you share this with your team, and they have a roadmap of where to go to as well. When I was doing my systems under FSMA, we had tons and tons of notebooks all over the place, and finding the document you wanted was very hard. So now we got computers, we can point to them, we can highlight them and put links to them. So now we have CAICO. Let me get out of that.
And Dan, it's not just finding the document, it's a specific section in the document.
Yep.
And you got a 60-page document and one paragraph that you need to find. Having it in that tracking worksheet is something that's very important. So it's great to be here. I'm Greg from TAGO representing the RPO world. And if you know about the ecosystem, there's two sides to it. There's the assessment world where the C3PAOs exist, and there's the RPO side. We have a code of ethics, but our mission is to actually help you implement CMMC. And if you could switch to the other slide, a little bit about TAGO. We're a Raleigh, North Carolina-based company. We do framework implementations across the board. So pretty much any framework that you can think about, TAGO will help the organization navigate that, including SOC 2 is very popular in ISO, and even tying certifications together. So we'll go to the next slide. Importantly, we're an RPO, and I don't want to talk about TAGO specifically, but I do want to talk about what our experience is and what we've done in the RPO world, and something you need to understand. The RPO is really an extension of your team if it's done right, if you're using the right one. Most of the organizations don't have a full GRC. They're also having difficulty with resources, running IT and running their own compliance. The RPO is uniquely suited to fit in and help complement your operation, and really to any degree that you need. The key thing is that we have the awareness of what's required, what the guys next to me are going to be asking for. We can help guide you through that process efficiently and on your schedule. We have the slide saying we're tailored to small and medium-sized companies. I would say that's true, except that one of our main customers is a $60 billion a year revenue customer. That's not a small company, right? But what it is a small GRC team that has had the unfortunate assignment of having to implement CMMC. So it's the same situation, same story, big company, just a small group of people that have to implement this, and they have to do it right. And more importantly, I'll get to this, but I'm going to get to it right now. You're all just sitting out there saying, well, what are we going to do about getting certified? Yeah, that's everybody's focus. Let's get certified. Well, to get there takes a lot, but you know what else happens after you're certified? You're going to have to get certified again. So all those controls that you implement and maintain, are going to have to be maintained over time. In newsflash, in IT, there's entropy. There's constant change. Katie talked about it. We've talked about it in this panel. You have to be able to run your change management, risk management, third-party risk management, and, typically that's going to run away from you if you're just focused on one goal to get certified, because if that's not the deadline or the finish line, that's really the starting line for continued compliance. Then another key thing that I want to mention about RPOs is that while we're extension of your team, we can always be there, but there's another key thing that a lot of you don't think about, especially if you're a decision maker, is continuity. So I just mentioned maybe a 5-person GRC team. Guess what happens when you start to build up your chops with CMMC? Toby hires them. And now you don't have that same employee that helped you get that certification. If you have an RPO, you got an organization that gives you that continuity. That's an important concept to remember, right, Toby? Next slide. I want to just quickly hit some trends that we're seeing that really should resonate with you, and a little tips for you. Is gross underestimation of the implementation effort. And that really cascades into everything. The proper scope, which we've all talked about. You can't have an SSP if you don't have the right scope. And then really bad knowledge of the assets that they have, both the data assets and the physical assets, and where the CUI is in the environment. That process really, RPOs are going to go in and make everybody's life a lot easier to go in under low stress, help get control of the CUI, knowing where it's at, getting it in the scope, building the SSP. The other thing I want to say, and I see this when I talk about RPO work, is, hey, Greg, Enclave's a silver bullet. We're just going to move all our CUI over there, build some boundaries, set up a new domain, and then we're CMMC compliant. Well, I got news flashes for you. It's not always true, and it really is rarely true, because in the operation, you're going to have CUI moving through other places. Think business development. Think legal for the contract information. So it has to be more than just saying everything's going to live in the enclave and we don't have to worry about it. The other thing about the enclave that we've seen in trends is the shared responsibilities matrix, or now it's a CRM, right? Customer responsibility matrix. That is something that you want to have your RPO go through, and we're especially skilled at doing that and holding to task the enclave provider to all of the 320 objectives that they promised they would deliver. And guess what we can do? Because we're there for you, we can offer an internal audit, or we, the RPO, can actually go and audit those controls to make sure that they're in place, because you're going to be on the hook to make sure the enclave's doing what they say, or the MSP's doing what they say. And we're really interested in making sure all that, or the RPOs are really interested in making sure all that works, so that when the C3POs come in, you're going to have a less stressful experience and you'll get some ROI out of this effort. And we're going to leave this slide up because it's a nice indication of what this road looks like. Now, we put this together to help explain this to our customers, and I think for pretty much every RPO on this panel would agree that this is kind of the road, and it goes on forever. And look at it at the top left, you'll see that there's like a 6 to 12 month implementation. That's being kind to some organizations. There's just straight out structural issues that you have to be concerned about, like workflows for your CUI and how's that going to play with an enclave that you have to figure out. And this process is not easy. And if you're sitting on your hands and you're waiting for something to happen, and if Katie didn't get you motivated enough to get started now, because an assessment, and a successful assessment, probably not going to happen anytime sooner than 6 months, if not a year. So get started now. Think about engaging an RPO to help you, because we're uniquely set up by the ecosystem to provide the services that will get you there in implementation.
Yeah, and I would add there, there's a lot of talk about how hard this is. they're probably doing a lot of what you're supposed to be doing throughout your infrastructure, but you don't have it documented. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. On the MSP piece, too many OSCs, organizations seeking compliance, just say we're going to give it to the cloud provider, we're going to give it to the MSP, and we don't have any responsibility. We don't have to worry about it. I've been in assessments where I'm talking to the MSP, not to the company. Remember, and this is another reason to take the CCP class if you have the opportunity. We're striving, and Katie mentioned it in her speech, we're striving for institutionalization. We want everybody from the CEO all the way down to the secretary and the IT folks, everybody, to have a vested interest in understanding what CMMC is all about, why we need to be diligent. And remember, it's not just the DoD that's at risk. Your business is at risk. Everybody's job in that business is at risk. Because if you get hit with a ransomware attack, or if something happens where some IP shows up in China and you've made an attestation that you're doing all of these things, but you're not really doing that, you can get looked at through the False Claims Act. Now, I don't think you're going to go to jail, but I've seen hundreds of thousands and even millions of dollars be awarded or levied on people that say this is what we're doing, but this is not what we're doing.
Dan, I don't think we mentioned it in our brief before, but I mean, there are law firms that are setting up shop to do whistleblower work to find organizations that are falsely attesting through their SPRS scoring and their attestation efforts. And they are making money. I mean, there's well-known incidents, and this isn't just the big companies that are getting hit. There are, companies with $10 to $20 million revenue having a recent settlement of $4.5 million for a False Claims Act settlement. That's a big deal. And so how many lawyers do we have out there today?
No.
We got one. Well, let's not gang up on them, but it's turning into an industry that really is good because it's a balance to everything that's happening in this system. But there's risk there.
Right. So we invite you to come up to the mic. I have questions, but I rather not have to use my questions. And we have a very brave young man.
Thank you. Hello. Why, thank you. Contram, Beyond Group Cyber, RPO, right? I have 3 questions, and I think a lot of the folks around here that are looking for consulting, RPOs or C3POs or LTPs or learning platforms right here, they'll probably ask these different questions too. And since we have everybody on the board, might as well ask them, right? So 3 questions I have. First one, where do they start? Between scoping or gap assessments, what's the pros and cons when you see of starting at a gap assessment or the scoping versus scoping or gap assessments? Go ahead.
And I'd love to jump on that one if you guys don't mind. It's the scoping, from my opinion. You really can't operate until you understand the workflows and the assets that are involved in that environment. And it's frequently updated from anything that the organization has done in the past. So to get that picture, know what you're looking at, and then start to build the assessment. You really can't assess against just some ambiguous general controls without knowing how they apply. And the other piece of that is you have to know the systems that are involved, because one of the trends we see when we're doing pre-assessment is organizations kind of favorably picking an objective and saying, well, this system has MFA, but the 3 other systems that are in scope don't. You can't get to that decision making because all of those systems have to have MFA. You can't get to that point without knowing the systems that are involved. It's got to be scoping. And I'll take any debate from this group.
No, I would agree with that completely, and I would add too that one of the problems. So if you go through a gap assessment without your scope being well defined, the results of that gap assessment won't really be of use to you because really everything becomes dependent on, well, it depends on if this is in scope, or, once you have your scope determined, go do this. So it doesn't actually give you kind of a representative, it's not representative of what you've implemented, because you got to go figure out the scope problem first. So you don't get a lot of value out of it. You get more value if you do scope first.
Just had one comment to add, and I think Cole said this earlier in his presentation, is keep the scope really narrow and tight initially until you achieve your certification. But I would add that before you even get down to scoping or the gap assessment, like you were saying, an organization, the senior leadership cannot be illiterate to CMMC and expect to get certified. Not going to happen. So I think knowledge acquisition, to what Daniel said earlier, is at least understand, or someone in the organization pursues the CCP program, the certification, even if you don't take the exam, get the knowledge, and then the first document to read, and it's actually a 20-page document or 19, I think is the scoping document, and use that to establish the scope.
Thank you, guys. Question number 2. Which one's more value added, an RPO or in-house self-assessment first, and why?
I want to take that one too, so I'll jump on.
Well, it's all for you,
This
Greg.
this isn't self-serving. A fellow RPO asking the questions I appreciate. So I mean, we're in this. The thing we see is there's traditionally not a role assigned to deal with it. So that self-assessment is often, I don't want to be harsh, but they take favorable interpretations if they've even read the assessment guide, which they haven't. So there's that, right? You're already lost in that self-assessment. So bringing in the RPO to come in is what I would recommend. Now, that's not to say Dan's made great recommendations. We all have. Get your people trained in it. Get them reading the assessment guide. Maybe even have them start to take a crack at it. That will help us narrow down that funnel of work so that we can get to a meaningful scope and an actual assessment. But I think what I'm seeing, and it goes back to just your Spurs reporting, these favorable 110s or 80 to 110s, and then we come in just on our assessment and it's immediate, negative 15 because they were just not really aligning themselves with the assessment guide or even the intent of what the control objectives are, and it's been a problem.
I'd like to add to that prior to the CMMC bubbling up, I did some of the prime contractors were already asking small businesses to be in line with 171. As Katie said, this has been around for a while. It's tough to be critical of your own internal environment. And I was asked a couple of times to come in and, can you help us with our self-assessment? And I didn't know what to expect at first, and I went there. We sat around a conference room table, and it kind of went like this. So we are supposed to do multi-factor authentication in all our systems. Tom, do we do that? Yeah, we kind of do. Well, we do that. Yeah, let's. It was all very anecdotal. It wasn't really a deep dive. I think you really need to have, at least, like you said, somebody educated that can be critical, maybe an internal auditor or assessor, or bring somebody in outside that can, not doing a formal assessment, but being able to, they don't have a love for what they built.
I'd go back to the 320-second thing I mentioned earlier, and thank you, Ali, for bringing that up. Spend the 5 minutes and 20 seconds a day reading it. What's going to happen is you should have an expert come in and help you. And somebody in administration and businesses, usually in the middle, says, no, we don't have budget. And then you're stuck. You want to bring in an expert and you can't. So the next best thing is read 800-171A or the CMMC Level 2 Assessment Guide. It is very well written. It gives you example implementation statements by objective. And if you read it and spend some time with it, you'll find that NIST did a great job of writing it in human.
And last but not least, I don't want to take up much more time than I have since I've taken up about 15 minutes already. A lot of us are asking about enclaves, right? There's so many enclaves out there. Some people say that their enclaves are the best. Others are not. Some cost so much. Some cost so little. How do we identify what is a good enclave where to get this enclave, and at the end of the day, why enclave versus in-house?
I'll start with in-house versus outsource. Really depends on your comfort level. It's not easy to run an enclave. I ran a certified enclave for 25 years, and it's a lot if you're doing it all internally. There are cloud providers, right? Those cloud providers, you have to have FedRAMP. One note we talked about earlier, the FAR CUI rule is close to coming out. The FLAR is going to supersede the DoD rule, and there's not going to be an equivalency. So if you're going to be FedRAMP, you got to be FedRAMP. Managed service providers, other external service providers, can be level 2 certified. But remember, just because a managed service provider is level 2 certified doesn't mean you automatically inherit everything and you don't have to worry about anything. You are still responsible for what your think of them as a subcontractor. At the end of the day, you're responsible for what you're doing. And remember, too, we talked about attestation. In the new rule, this changed from the original rule, you only get assessed every 3 years. But at the end of every year, you have to attest, somebody corporate with signature authority, that you are maintaining the same level of compliance or higher that you were assessed for. So you got to do that it's not, I got my assessment, I'm done for 3 years. It's really closer to 2.5 years because you do have to prepare. Anybody else want to weigh in?
So I would offer a thought here. Every business is unique. If you own a bicycle, you don't buy 4 wheels for a car and try to put them on your bike. And so when you ask the question, is the enclave right answer, is the enterprise the right answer, or which enclave to pick, take the time to identify what your business needs are. And everybody knows this, but we go to churches, mosques, and synagogues every weekend to hear the same stuff we already believe in. That's why we have to keep repeating this stuff about compliance. Find out what your business needs, and then you have to look at the products in the market and find the one that matches your business need and meets the compliance need.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I do want to just caution, because that in an advisory context for the RPO, you probably have done this. You get to the point where that makes sense. You do a selection that's based on the business requirements, and there's all sorts of things. You let the customer prioritize those requirements and then evaluate. And price is oftentimes in that factor. But the one thing I really want to talk about, and a key variable that we focus on, is that SRM. How many the control objectives is the enclave going to commit to? And that's a huge selection variable. So you'll have a huge range. Like, we've seen commitment to SRM down to as many as 100 controls all the way up to like 270. I know, Toby, you offer a substantial amount too. So getting that, and then also just the warning to you all, you have that SRM, they present that to you in the sales cycle. When you're signing the agreement, you sure as heck better make sure that's written into the SLAs of the contract that you're signing with them. And we've seen that get kind of glazed over too. So the SRM turns out to be an important factor when you're doing the selection, but then as everybody's mentioned, the business needs.
So Greg brought up a really important point. In the last Tuesday evening CyberAB call, they pointed out that some people are offering products that claim to get you 100% compliant or 90% compliant just by buying the product. That can't be true, because there are requirements about your own physical security or the background checks on your own employees. So be really cautious about anybody who claims that you can just buy their product and get there. Our own offering gets you between 50 and 70%, depending on the complexity of your business. There's real work to do for every single company in order to get compliant. You cannot just write a check and make this go away.
Sir.
Greg, I'm not really an attorney.
Oh, good.
Dan, how much time do we have left?
15 minutes.
Great. So So, Cole, you mentioned make or break controls. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, sure. So there's a scoring methodology. So, when you're evaluated against each control, there's a point value associated with those controls, whether you meet them or you don't meet them. So really, there's some nuance to it, but any of those 3-point and 5-point controls, if you don't meet those in an assessment, then you fail the assessment. There's a couple of exceptions, and you can get some credit for partial implementation, but in general, those are the controls. I mean, you want to get them all, but when you're focused on, those are the ones you want to focus on.
Right. So there's certain ones that can be POAMs and
Correct.
certain ones that can't.
Correct. Yep.
Let's see. Greg, you mentioned continuous compliance. What recommendations would you give for achieving that?
Yeah, so the biggest one's rock solid change management. So we have scope that's got systems that are involved with it, and you have various policies and procedures that are written to the existence of that environment, that scope as it was. You have to have diligent change management to document what you had, what the changes were, and how that affects the compliance and the controls that you're doing. And you may have the certification 2 years down the road. You have to be able to draw that line saying, here's what we said we had, or here's what we did have and got the certification. Here are changes that were made. We still believe that it addresses and is compliant with this specific, the tenet of this control objective. So change management is hugely overlooked. Again, we're starting to see that. Everybody's like, let's get certified. It's not. You're keeping your certification on a quarterly, if not monthly basis, and maybe even more frequently than that. But that's actually that. And then third-party risk management is something that's very often neglected. It's typically dealt with on a like a whole different departments doing, like the risk department or legal's doing third-party risk management. We just talked about it. You're using products and services, and now potentially an enclave. You want to make sure that you've run them through your organization's third-party risk management, and then in the overall risk management in general. So risk assessment and risk management techniques are really important. That are they're tested in CMMC, but they're also really at the core of a lot of the frameworks that we adjust. So 27001 and SOC 2 are all right in there. So those are the ones that I would say are key to focus on for the continuing of your compliance.
Just want to mention who in between years. So every 3 years you get a certification. It's important to remember they took right from Sarbanes-Oxley, a financial rule, this concept that the individual in your company who signs off in between years to say you're still compliant, they are personally and legally responsible for the claim, not the corporation. That means they get the 20-year jail sentence and $250,000 fine if they sign off on the document saying the company is still compliant when it's not, and multiply that by 320 claims. So you will want to have change management and be sure that you're engaging in continuous compliance, or they won't sign the paper.
Yeah, and cyber insurance won't cover you in any of those situations either. So, I mean, it's really important. Don't get myopic on just getting the certification. Plan as you're implementing to get there to make it continue going past that certification timeline.
Ali, I've got to know, Iowa's number one? You had on your slide?
What was number one? I'm sorry.
Iowa's number one on your slide?
Iowa.
Iowa.
No, yeah. Sorry.
I got to know.
There are about, I think, 63 or 65 C3 PAOs out there, and we believe we are the first one from the state of Iowa.
Okay. Great. And Toby, or really any of you guys, came up the alignment of CMMC with other frameworks. What are you seeing in the environment? Is that happening, or is that a pipe dream?
Are you asking if there's reciprocity between other frameworks?
Is there a movement in that direction?
There's a movement in that direction. There's overlap. ISO 27001 is about 60%, give or take. But at the moment, there's no official word of any reciprocity that I'm aware of.
No. You're crosswalking it, and at that point, you're going to need a GRC tool. If you didn't already, I had it as one of my bullets, but trying to manage this through just a worksheet, and then it's going to be difficult, especially the continuous piece of it. A good GRC tool is going to give you that crosswalk to some extent, and that reporting so that you can dial it in. And I'm actually seeing that. So the manufacturers that we're dealing with are, in fact, because they already have ISO and all the ISO standards for the manufacturing side and 9001, they want to get 27001 after they do CMMC. So I'm actually seeing a trend towards that. And I think that's going to pick up, actually. If they're building all this maturity in their environment and their control environment, why not take a couple extra steps and get another certification that's going to be industry, agnostic?
Well, one thing I have seen is that inside the United States and the Five Eyes, there is a movement towards that. ISO being an international standard is very tough to be in line with everything else because they have too many gods to listen to, right? And it had been looked at many years ago when the ISO was percolating to look at 853 as a standard for ISO. And it was just too much for the international community to chew on.
Or was it not invented here?
Well, there's that too, right? We do FIPS, they do common criteria, and in a lot of ways it's exactly the same, but not invented here is certainly, especially with some of the countries on the other side of the pond.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there? Well, feel free to show up at the mic if you want to. I'd like to know from the C3PAOs if you could give an OSC an hour, what would you focus on for them to pay closest attention to start their process? Not to get through to certification, but how do I, and a lot of that's what a lot of these small businesses have been asking. Where do I start? Anybody?
Yeah, I think I would start with where is the CUI in my organization and how does that CUI flow in and through my organization, and then also scope. Those are the two things, scope and data flow. That's what I would spend an hour just going over that and asking questions and trying to help them understand.
And if you don't know where CUI is and you can't figure it out, or you think it's in the future, you just imagine where it would be. Get a whiteboard. Have your network diagram there. Have all your vendors in a box, and just start drawing lines. Where would it go? Does it go through contracting? Does it go through legal? Draw a line. Oh, it's going down to engineering. Oh, now it's going to the shop floor. And just draw an arrow and just visualize it and use that as the basis to form your scope.
And ask the other departments. I mentioned that we had this kind of aha moment where we thought we had everything with the teams until we brought in the business development folks who ended up just ingesting all sorts of, so they're out, you think, just winning and getting sales, but they're seeing the sales all the way through to the point that the proposal's being written and then the proposal being executed, and at that point you got contract information, you got the CUI starting because they're following up on it, and no one even thought business development would get involved. So ask everybody in the organization what their workflows are to try to see it. And starting with an interview is a good way to do it. But newsflash, that CUI is going to be other places too. What you consciously think about is one thing. Where it ends up on SharePoint is a whole different story.
There is a process where you can start an enclave with the intent to expand it to the entire enterprise, right? Get the bones in place, get your core policies, procedures, and practices, get everybody a little familiar with it, and start pulling in people. But you want to complete that before your assessment, but you can crawl, walk, run.
What are some of the perceived unlikely places that CUI has been found that it probably either needs to be better managed or shouldn't be there, that you found in your journey through the assessments or the pre-assessments?
I already mentioned the sheriff point. You see people, and it depends on what the policy is. Sometimes it's policy violation. Sometimes policy wasn't written properly, and they're downloading it to anything that's convenient for them to work with and do their job. And the argument's always, getting business and earning revenue for the company is more important than trying to pay attention to this. Or there's just no awareness of it at all. So some of that can be tightened up with policy, but just general misuse. And then the other problem we have with Enclave, and Toby, we didn't really talk about this, but you got 2 domains and you've got restrictions, but you're in flight on building the restrictions on production to stop CUI from coming in, but you've been focused on the Enclave and all the controls up there. So we're seeing emails coming in and CUI coming in back into the .com versus the .gov that we have for the Enclave. I mean, that's also something that we're going to say. I'm sure you've probably seen that too.
It's ugly, and there's not an easy answer. It's user training, DLP rules. Really, we've talked about educating yourself and your team. I know it's not going to happen, but if you could somehow get your whole company to just read the section of the implementation guide that affects their life, or the sections, they would understand the why. Users fight doing things that they don't understand why and seem to restrict their life and the ease of working. If you can let them understand why, then they can have buy-in, and then they comply.
No,
go ahead.
Yeah, I would just add that one of the things we've seen is larger organizations that have not necessarily legacy systems, but systems they've used across their entire enterprise for a very long time, and there's an immense amount of data stored on those. And there's almost certainly, as we would say, there is definitely CUI, but I don't know where it is, right? So I know it's on this thing, but there's 1.5 million things on this thing. So to go find it and actually identify it is a massive undertaking. So what you end up having to do is protect that entire system as though it is CUI, right? So it becomes in scope, even though really there may just be a very small fraction of what's on there is actually CUI. So,
and have fun trying to get that AS400 into scope with any type of conventional controls we're all familiar with.
100%.
All right.
Yeah.
I would just throw in cross shredders. I mean, unless you have a blowtorch and you're going to burn things down to white ash, like when you print stuff out, you have to destroy it, and the government has standards for that. And that means you're going to spend $1,500 to $3,000 for a shredder, not your Staples $49.95 shredder. And so we see people who do have enabled printing not investing in the right stuff to be able to get rid of that paper. So that's a big thing, just people don't realize.
That's a good one.
And a lot of this is just paying attention, not only for the training. You have to do the training. No, please.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I do have a couple of questions. First one, within the assessment boundary, does every cloud service provider, CSP, need to be FedRAMPed?
Every cloud service provider, yes.
Okay. And then second question is, what are some effective ways to reduce assessment scope, and would you recommend virtualization as a way to that end?
So the best way is segmenting, right? Try to separate through VPN, whatever mechanism you can, VLANs and stuff like that, things that you don't want exposed to CUI from what you have CUI in. So have no physical or logical connection or some kind of separation, either physically or logically.
I just want to touch on the cloud service provider. So the federal rule is going to not allow equivalency. For the time being, equivalency is permitted for defense contractors. So be cautious, because if you choose a tool that has equivalency and you pass your assessment and the federal rule comes out and suddenly you're in violation, and then you switch that tool and it's a significant tool, that's a major change, which could trigger your need to pay for another assessment. Also, many vendors do not understand that you are not FedRAMP if you use a service that's FedRAMP. Just because you buy Amazon and Amazon has a FedRAMP certificate doesn't mean the cool software that you built and you're running on Amazon is FedRAMP. That's another thing to watch out for because the industry doesn't really understand what it means. So really important questions to dig in that area.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When you're talking about FedRAMP, there's two certifications. There's the enclave certification, and then there's the application certification. Just putting an application in a FedRAMP VM doesn't get you certified. Okay, I think our time is... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you did ask about VDI. Virtualization is a very effective way to constrain costs, especially if your budget for equipment replacement doesn't align with your need to comply.
Yeah, I would also imagine VDI would be a good way to eliminate, if you could, certain physical equipment control families, things like maintenance or the P&E. So just a thought. Yep.
Yeah, just be careful with your engineers that want to have SolidWorks on their big fancy desktop workstation, and they don't want to use that very expensive virtual device up in the Enclave cloud.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for participating. We were out of time. If you want your continuing education credit, you can scan your badge back with the young lady in the back at the table. I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you guys again.
Good job, guys. Yeah, same to you. Well, I'm going to take off.
Wish I was going this week.
Good to meet you. Until we meet again. Yeah, that's right.
I kept the...
Good to meet you as always. That's all right.